Our top story tonight on Gravitas is about India and China. The two countries have achieved a significant breakthrough today. On Monday, India and China struck a new border patrolling pact that could ease tensions between the two sides. India and China have reached an agreement on patrolling arrangements along the line of actual control, or the LAC. Now, this is a major development. The agreement could pave the way for the disengagement of troops from both sides of the tense border and lead to a resolution of the ongoing tensions between the two countries. The Indian Foreign Secretary made the announcement on Monday. Listen in.
As a result of these discussions, agreement has been arrived at on patrolling arrangements along the line of actual control in the India-China border areas, leading to disengagement and a resolution of the issues that had arisen in these areas in 2020.
Now, the agreement follows multiple rounds of talks between the two sides over the years, talks that have aimed at resolving the issue. It is understood that the agreement pertains to patrolling in Depsang and Demchok areas. Remember, tensions between the two neighbours began with skirmishes in May 2020 and have persisted since then. Earlier this month, the Indian Army chief said that New Delhi wants the status on the frontier in the Western Himalayas to be restored to its pre-April 2020 position, that is, before the standoff started. And over the past 4 years, slow progress on diplomatic and military talks to end the standoff has hurt business relations between the world's two most populous countries. New Delhi has tightened scrutiny of investments from Chinese firms and halted major projects. The last meeting of the Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination on India-China Border Affairs was held in late August in Beijing. The two sides said that they had a frank, constructive and forward-looking exchange of views on LAC situation. It was agreed that restoration of peace and tranquility and respect for the LAC are the essential basis for restoration of normalcy in the bilateral ties. Though discussions with China resolved standoffs in various locations previously, some areas remained unresolved until now. The recent agreement will help in addressing these remaining standoff areas. Now, some say that the agreement on patrolling arrangements could pave the way for a bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. The two countries have decided to uphold peace and tranquility in the border areas in line with bilateral agreements and protocols, and restoration of peace and respect for the LAC are essential for normalizing bilateral ties. Will we see the Indian Prime Minister holding talks with the Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the BRICS summit is the immediate question that arises. The summit themed strengthening multilateralism for just global development and security will essentially provide a platform for the two leaders to discuss key global issues. It will also present an opportunity to review progress on BRICS initiatives and explore new areas for cooperation. Both India and China are part of the BRICS bloc, an informal group of states comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, in response to a question on a possible bilateral between the two leaders on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. The Indian Foreign Secretary said, and I'm quoting here, "As far as the question on the bilateral meetings is concerned, this is a multilateral event, though there is always a provision for bilateral meetings on the sidelines. We are currently looking over the overall program of the Prime Minister. There are a lot of requests for bilateral meetings, and we will update on the bilaterals as they evolve," quote unquote. But the story is not over. It's been a long journey, after all, when it comes to resolving the India-China border standoff. It's been a long journey to actually reach this point. The last time India and China had a conflict was in 1962. The two countries went to war over the disputed border. Throughout the summer of 1962, there were skirmishes along with the border areas between troops of both countries. The war ended in a few months with the ceasefire, but it taught India to be extra cautious and vigilant when it comes to China. The relationship between the countries has recovered after a series of border agreements since the 1990s, and then after decades, skirmishes broke out between the Indian soldiers and the Chinese troops in 2020. At least 20 Indian soldiers were killed in hand-to-hand combat in the Galwan Valley in Ladakh. By February 2022, the number of Chinese mobile apps banned by India climbed from 59 at the time of the border scuffle to 321. And by December 2022, minor border scuffles broke out in the Tawang sector of India's northeastern state of Arunachal Pradesh, which is also claimed by China as part of southern Tibet. And then nearly 8 months later, Prime Minister Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping agreed to intensify efforts to disengage and de-escalate when they met on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Johannesburg. In June this year, that is June 2024, the Indian Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar met his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi. This was on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or SCO summit. According to reports, the two sides agreed to step up talks to resolve issues along their border. By September 2024, Dr. S. Jaishankar said that about 75% of the disengagement problems at the border had been sorted out. And in October, this deal was signed. Let's get in further details now from my colleague Siddhant Sibal, who's joining us on the broadcast. He's been tracking all those developments regarding the BRICS summit, getting us reports from on the ground. Siddhant, what are you picking up at this point in light of this major breakthrough that has happened between India and China? Do we or do we not see a meeting happening between the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President? What are the reactions that you're getting at this point?
Well, in all likelihood, it looks like that there will be a bilateral meeting between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, we know last year at the BRICS summit in South Africa, both leaders had a conversation, an informal conversation, something that the cameras also saw. But essentially, there was no sit-down bilateral meeting. Now, with the Indian Foreign Secretary making that big announcements of the agreement on patrolling, it looks like that will pave way for a conversation. The last bilateral meeting between the two leaders was way back in 2019 before the Galwan incident in which India lost several of its soldiers. Now, I'm standing here in Kazan and of course the city is jacked up for the BRICS summit. The BRICS summit will of course see gathering of several world leaders including India and China, and we have seen in the past as well BRICS has provided an opportunity for the leaders of both the countries, two large countries, both geographically, both population wise and economic wise, to have conversation, and it looks like that Kazan can make way for a thaw between Beijing and New Delhi.
Interesting. We are leaving it there for the moment, Siddhant. Thanks very much for those updates, and of course we are coming back to you as and when we learn more. To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.